I'm always excited to come and pray here. This is my third time here, and it's such a blessing. But kind of feeding off what I was talking about in the sermon, on how God takes a physical situation but has a spiritual goal, okay? He takes a physical situation, physical circumstance, whether it be relational, hard, like a troubling period in life, whatever the situation may be. He takes a physical situation and then he tries to use it to reach a spiritual, deeper goal in us uniquely. Okay, uniquely is key. Because everybody's spiritual situation or physical circumstances are different. Everybody has a very unique physical circumstance. Okay, talk to everybody here. Everybody will tell you, I got a problem. Okay, but everybody's problem will be different. What you might find is that two people have a problem with their respective spouses. Yes, it's a marital problem, but each one is different and unique in itself. That's just an example. Okay, so we may have like classified relational problems. Okay, but each problem for every individual here is unique. All right. What I was saying is that God uses those unique situations because He has a spiritual goal, okay, that He's trying to get us to learn from. All right? The problem is, like, when we look, we see that the Samaritan woman followed our Lord where He was leading her. Okay? The conversation took a sudden twist, but she followed Him, okay, in the conversation and where she was going and where He was leading her, which brought her to facing the reality of her life, okay, which was the real heart of the issue. Not everybody has a conversation with our Lord by a well, okay, but He still uses the same technique where He uses something physical and He leads us along, okay, and He wants to reach something spiritual because ultimately what He wants is transformation for us. For us, commonly, in this day and age, happens over a period of time, okay? For the Samaritan woman, it happened in one chapter in the Gospel, all right? Conversation by a well. But for us, okay, it happens over time, okay? As a situation develops, as a problem unfolds, as we begin to hit like difficulties in life, all right? What allows us to follow God in the path that He's leading us towards His spiritual goal is silence and solitude, okay? Silence and solitude are the key factors, okay, that allow us to follow God where He's leading us day by day, situation by situation, conversation by conversation, interaction that happen over a period of time, interpreting those, understanding those, in order to get to the spiritual goal, which is where transformation happens, requires silence and solitude. Okay? I want to look at Ephesians 4:22 and 24. It says that you put off concerning your former conduct the old man which grows corrupt according to deceitful lust, and that you put on the new man which was created according to God in true righteousness and holiness. Okay? I like this verse. I find it very enlightening. It's one of these verses that, like, I have a stack of verses that I say, I love to give this verse out. I hate it when somebody says it to me. Love to just say, like, hey, be a new man. All right? Be transformed. I love to give it, but when somebody says it to me, I'm just like, come on, like, fine, I understand I'm a simple person, I'm corrupt, and like I have lusts and different things, but just like put them away, like, it seems a little bit complicated, seems a little bit harder than just like making them like two verses right next to each other, like, okay, I'm corrupt, I walk in corrupt, I walk out of church, and I'm fine. It seems like there's more to it. There's a period of time that happens. Okay? So there's one of these verses that, like, it's great to use in talks, but the application of it is much more than an hour long. All right? But what I kept out is the key middle part. And be renewed in the spirit of your mind. And be renewed in the spirit of your mind. And that you put on the new man, which was created according to God in true righteousness and holiness. Okay? That whole be renewed in the spirit of your mind, that's the journey. That's a journey of life. That is, it is not even its own sentence or its own verse. Okay? It is like packed in there. But that's the journey. Okay? That's how God, again, like I was saying, takes us a physical circumstance, okay, but is leading us to a spiritual goal, okay, comes through the renewing of our mind, and like I was saying, that happens over time. No adolescent becomes an adult like that. You don't ask a high schooler, okay, I want you to worry about life insurance and paying health insurance premiums and getting a job and stuff like that without giving him the proper time, him or her the proper time to go through life, learn the lessons that they need to learn, make the mistakes they need to make, in order to finally come to the point where they have enough experience and maturity to just take a stab at it. Not do it right, okay, just take a stab at it. I make plenty of mistakes, all right? But that process is the renewing and the transformation of this adolescent who grows into adulthood's mind. Likewise for us, the physical circumstance, condition, that God has allowed us to experience, okay, the spiritual goal comes through the renewing of our mind over time. Okay? I like this quote a lot. John Calvin said, "Our wisdom consists almost entirely of two parts, the knowledge of God and of ourselves. But as these are connected together by many ties, it is not easy to determine which two proceeds and give birth to another." Okay? So our wisdom consists entirely of two parts. The knowledge of God. So like in my life, okay, all the knowledge I have, he's saying, like, you can kind of break it up into two things. How much I know about God and how much I know about myself. Okay? How much I know about God and how much I know about myself can essentially determine the way we begin to function in society. Okay? What I know about God and what I know about myself, how well I know myself, how well I understand my thoughts, my feelings, my struggles, all those things, okay, determine how I will interact with people in life. Okay? Likewise, my knowledge about God, how I perceive Him, like, determines kind of my worldview. And the two together begin to dictate how, or predict, whatever word you want to use, predict how we interact. Okay? St. Augustine said this way: "How can you draw close to God when you are far from your own self?" Okay? Remember our first verse when we were talking about the renewing of your mind, okay? And we're saying that our next step was that, like, when we really divide out what we know in life, we know stuff about God, okay? And we know stuff about ourselves, all right? And St. Augustine says, how can you draw close to God when you are far from your own self? Meaning, all right? The second part. How can you draw close to God when you are far from your own self? What he was implying by this verse is saying, without understanding who you are as an individual, it is very difficult to come into a very unique and authentic relationship with God. Without understanding who you are as an individual, okay? Difficult to step into a unique, authentic relationship with God. So he said, "Grant, Lord, that I may know myself, that I may know Thee." Grant, Lord, that I may know myself, that I may know Thee. So the question, every time I see this quote by St. Augustine, like, the way it works out of my mind is saying, like, if I don't know who I am, then I always ask myself, then who in this body is loving God? If I have no idea who I am as an individual, then who is loving God? If I do not understand who I am as an individual, then who is actually loving God? Okay? Remember, let me kind of keep the perspective the same. physical circumstance, spiritual goal. One of the spiritual goals that God has is to touch something deep within us that we did not know either existed or needed attention or anything like that. So his goal was to touch something inside of us, and that process of touching something, fulfilling a deep thirst that we have, allows us to step into a greater understanding of who we are. And when we have a greater understanding of who we are, then I'm able to come and love God and be in a unique, authentic, and genuine relationship with Him. That it's not a manufactured relationship out of emotion, but it's a constructed relationship by intention. Okay? And all this is what happens in that process of transformation. Genesis 1:26 says, "And God said, 'Let us make man in our image and according to our likeness.'" This verse has a lot of implication. Okay? It said, "Let us make man in our image and our likeness." Okay? Now when we're talking about this road of transformation and this road of understanding who we are in order that we may love God and be in a honest, committed, genuine relationship with Him, okay, this verse gives us a big key, all right? Because when God created us, and He created us in His image and likeness, then during that creation process, what He instilled inside of us was the key to understanding this relationship, okay? What He instilled inside of us by making us in His image and His likeness was the key to understanding this relationship, okay? So the key to our relationship with God lies in the way that I was formed. What do I mean by that? When we talk about being made in His image and His likeness, let me quickly go over this. As God thinks, He gave me the ability to think. As God feels, I have the ability to feel. We know if we look at Old Testament, New Testament, we see a God who was passionate, who was jealous, who was angry, who cried for us, who wept over Jerusalem, who wept over Lazarus. We see a God who reached for us, who listened to us. We see a God who interacted with us. And so, as He feels, okay, and me being made in His image, so the feelings that I have inside of me come from somewhere. They come from God. And so in understanding my feelings, I get a greater understanding of who God is. The problem is, we don't spend enough time understanding what goes on inside of here. We don't spend enough time understanding what goes inside of here. So as God made us in His image and His likeness, the things that we, how we think, how we experience life, the things that we feel, the suffering that we go through, are all keys to understanding our relationship with God. Because He's the one who instilled them in us when He created us. So I like this verse from Proverbs 4:23, which says, "Keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it springs the issues of life." Keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it spring the issues of life. Okay? Why is this verse so important, and why is this verse so difficult too? Okay? Who here got into an argument with a friend, co-worker, boss, mother, father, your spouse, argument, okay? And it got intense, okay? How did you deal with it? I can tell you me, sometimes, when I'm just so frustrated, what do? Click on the TV. Click on TV, watch some sports. Why? Get my mind off of it. What am I hoping? Just to kind of ease like the anger, ease the tension away. And like really, like I tell myself, I'm going to come back and deal with this issue later. But if I'm honest with myself, what I want to do is numb it. What I want to do is numb the situation. Build enough distance from the actual like point of insult, okay? Like I want to build enough distance, kind of numb the pain, so then I can just say, I don't want to deal with it, I'm going to move on. So I'll numb it. Addiction of TV. Different people have different addictions. Okay? Some of us, okay, myself included, sometimes when I'm really frustrated, I'll clean the house. Sarah loves it, okay? It's a clean house, but I don't deal with issues. I'm just like, do stuff, do stuff, do stuff. Which is the exact opposite of this verse. Which is, keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it springs the issues of life. If my heart is in so much pain and my heart is suffering, okay, and all I want to do is numb it by doing whatever habitual action I can find, have I kept my heart with diligence, or have I buried it alive with pain? You think to yourself, give you 15 seconds. You think to yourself and identify. When you are hurt, when you are frustrated, what is it that you do to numb the pain? To bury it. To not deal with it. You have to be able to identify that. Because that's what we want. Think to yourself, what is it that you do to numb that pain? Henry Nouwen is very I'm just learning about him, but he's a very well-known scholar. Okay, has a PhD, taught in many different universities, in the Ivy League schools here in the States. He was a theologian, an author, a scholar, and he gave up all his, his prestige of teaching at all these different universities, and all his years of reading and studying and everything, and writing books, and he left it all, and he went, and I think he's somewhere actually in Toronto, and he serves the needy. He gave it all up, moved away, served the needy. Okay, but he's a scholarly gentleman. And he has this quote. He says, "Solitude is the furnace of transformation. Without solitude, we remain victims of our society and continue to be entangled in the illusions of the false self." So solitude is the furnace of transformation. Without solitude, we remain victims of our society and continue to be entangled in the illusions of false self. So what he's saying in this quote is that if we do not build into our lives silence, if we do not build into our lives solitude, okay, then essentially we just remain victims of life. So let's go back to our example. I asked everybody to think about that time when you were just hurt, angry, frustrated, and in dealing with it, what you did was you self-medicated with whatever your medication of choice is. TV, shopping, cooking, cleaning. You choose your own self-medication. You do it. Okay? We medicate and we don't deal with the issue. Okay? But right with that issue, okay, is where powerful transformation is waiting to happen. And what is lacking from that situation is silence and solitude. The ability to just take the noise away and to sit with yourself. Silence, the ability to quiet all the different voices around you, the voices of TV, the voices of dishes, the voices of shopping malls, whatever your medicated voice is, to silence all those voices, okay? And to find a place by yourself through which you can begin to deal with the issue at hand and begin to understand, why was I so angry? Why did they say this? Why did I react to this? All the questions that take time to ask and time to answer, because they won't happen in one sitting, okay? But when we miss that time of silence and solitude, we miss the opportunity of that transformation. How God is using that physical circumstance in your life in order to reach that underlying spiritual goal of transformation. And when we don't deal with it, what we're left with is something called like a false self. It's like a false image of who we are. Let's go into like the root of false selves. How do we end up with all these false self? Okay? So let's go back to week 2 of Lent. All right? Temptation week. Devil, talking with Jesus in the wilderness, he says, "If you are the Son of God, command that these stones become bread." All right? Devil said to Jesus at the end of 40 days, "If you are the Son of God, command that these stones become bread." Think of it in this, okay? Jesus' ministry was just beginning. He did not have the same following, if you will, that he had towards the end of his life. So at the beginning, all right, before really miracles were done, the devil came to him and he said, "Look, if you really are the Son of God, what you're claiming to be, make these stones turn into bread." The devil was trying to get Jesus to prove his identity. The devil was trying to get Jesus to prove his identity as the Son of God, and he wanted to do it through performance. Okay? He wanted Jesus to prove that he was the Son of God through performing. All right? Meaning, I am what I produce. I'm the Son of God because I can produce stones. I can produce bread from stones. Okay? Clearly, none of us are going to go out there and produce bread to stones. But we live in a society that tells us we need to produce. Okay? Everybody here who has a job, what do they tell you at work? You work hard, you produce, you get results, you get hired. You go to school, you work hard, you study hard, you get the good grades, you get the school you want. We live in a production-based society. You're an athlete. You train hard, you eat right, you lift hard, you stay committed to practice, you listen to what coach does, you win championships. We live in a production-based society. Society is telling you, society is telling me something. I'll tell you for me, what it tells me as a priest, you pray X number of liturgies, you take X number of confessions, you have a congregation that is X big, you're a good priest. Production-based. Starts to create this false image inside of my head of what it takes. My image and my self-worth begins to take on a false root, and that's the root of being production-based. Okay, let's look at the next one. "All these things I will give you if you kneel down and worship me." So the devil takes Jesus up to, and shows him all the riches. And he says, "All these I will give you if you worship me." You are what you own. You are your possessions. I have a 3-year-old son. Picked him up yesterday, and he's like, "Daddy, I want a Thomas umbrella." I'm like, "You don't even watch Thomas." I'm like, "Elijah, why do you want a Thomas umbrella?" Because he has a friend at school named Elijah, and my son's Elijah. Because Elijah E, he's Elijah M. Okay, in school, he's Elijah M. He has a friend, Elijah E, because Elijah E has a Thomas umbrella. Well, why do you need a Thomas umbrella? Because Elijah E has a Thomas umbrella. No joke, for the 15-minute ride home, my wife got the end of this, and he's like, Mommy, I want a Thomas umbrella. I want a Thomas umbrella. I want a Thomas umbrella. I want it. She's like, "Elijah, I'm not going to talk to you anymore about this issue." But he, at the age of 3, was told he is what he has. Okay? He is what he has. What about us as adults? We have capita, we have ability, we have jobs. What is it? What is society telling you about your worth in the context of what you have? The car you drive, the clothes you wear, the job you have, the status you have at work, the finances, the home, the decorations. You choose for yourself, like, what it is. What does society tell you, like, you need in order to have value, worth? Okay? Ask yourselves, too, if you have children, what do you sometimes tell your children you need to have? Huh? You need to have good grades. You need to get into the good school. I'm not saying that these things are wrong. This is not a pass to slack off. Okay? But the truth is, good grades or school make life like a little bit better. Okay? But they don't give you a sense of value and worth. And I can't tell you how many kids come and talk to me and say, like, I don't feel loved by my parent because I'm not as smart as my sibling. Or I don't feel like mom or dad accept me because I didn't get into this school. Something is a big miss when a child comes and says, I feel like mom and dad don't love me because I didn't reach a certain level in school. It means we've passed on to our kids that their value and worth is in the level that they achieve, the academics, their brain, their knowledge, rather than their self-worth is very innate and comes from God Himself. Okay? So we are what I have. And the last one, if you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, He shall give His angels charge over you, lest you dash your foot. All right? Last one is, I am what other people say I am. Okay? Popularity. I find my value and my worth from what people say I am. Okay? My son, going back to the example, was given the impression that because he doesn't have a Thomas umbrella, he's not that kid. He doesn't have a Thomas umbrella. Like, how dare you come to 30-year-old school without a Thomas umbrella? But like, we're told the same messages. We're given this idea that, like, well, if so-and-so doesn't acknowledge me, if so-and-so doesn't say, like, I'm great, then I guess I might not be. So these are three things that come and give us a false idea of who we are as individuals. Okay? But the only way to begin to sort through these things, okay, that have like subliminally filtered into our life and grabbed hold of our soul, okay, goes back to silence and solitude. Silencing the voices and sitting with ourselves. Silencing the voices and sitting with ourselves. And so if we ask the simple question to those three, like, well, you ask yourself, does God love me for what I produce? Does God love me for what I produce? Does God love me for what I have, the possessions that I have? Does God love me because of who other people say I am? Sometimes we have to break down these things and just ask ourselves very simple questions. We may say, no, God doesn't love me for what I produce. No, God doesn't love me for what I have. No, God doesn't love me for who others say I am. We may say it, but the question is, do we live it? We know the answers are no. But can we really internalize those answers and believe it is the greatest challenge. And it's hard to do that when we allow those voices to continually filter into our lives, continually talk to us, continually tell us, no, you are what you produce. No, you are what I say you are. If you have a boss at work, your boss says you are lazy. You are not a good worker. You are not a person of integrity. That stuff sits with you at night. That bothers you. When you go and you have a bad review at work, it bothers you. I like this song. J.J. Heller's a Christian artist. in the refrain of her song, in her song she talks about like a couple different circumstances. She talks about the boy who's made fun of at school, who feels like nobody loves him. She talks about a woman whose husband left, okay, and she's left there alone with her family now, as her husband left, thinking like, was there something wrong with me? And that's why he left? Was I not skinny enough? And that's why he left? And then the last person that she sings about in this song was somebody on death row, who just like is so tired of the agony of his life and the mistakes that he made in life that has now put him on death row. And he's just like crying out, saying like, I want this to all end. Because he's tired of just living alone. These three people, those three characters, all lived alone because they felt like nobody cared for who they were. People just wanted something out of them. But in the refrain of her song, she says this. She says, I will love you for you. Not for what you have done or what you will become. I will love you for you. I will give you the love that you never knew. God's love for us is very unique. God's love for us is not performance-based. God's love for us is not based on the possessions that we have or what other people say we are. His love is consistent. His love is faithful. We saw it last week with the prodigal son. It is not based on production. He had one son who stayed at home. He loved him. He had another son who went and did crazy things. He loved him when he came back. It wasn't about production. It wasn't about like obedience. Obedience allowed them to really enjoy that relationship. So obedience is important, okay? But it wasn't about how obedient. I like this quote by Ephraim. Let's deal with it. It says, when we keep silent, we have time for interior prayer, which brings full assurance, and for luminous thoughts which fill the understanding and the heart with light. Okay, when we keep silent, we have time for interior prayer, which brings full assurance, and for luminous thoughts which fill the understanding and the heart with light. One, I love nature. I love being out. I love camping. So that's why I love this picture. My wife and I always fight oh, if we had all this extra money, what kind of extra house would we buy? We're never going to have an extra house, but she always wants a beach house. I want something out in the woods, okay? Because it's just peaceful for me. You get away. I love being able to drive out, and then all of a sudden you have no cell phone reception. Best thing ever. I love retreat centers that don't have cell phone reception. Because it allows you time. It gives you time. It gives you silence. It gives you the opportunity to stop running away from issues and to actually start facing them. And it gives you time to face them without having the million voices from this world tell you, well, you got to face them, because if you don't face them in this way, I'm going to say that you're a wuss. Okay? I'm going to say that you're not a man, because you didn't tell this person that they were wrong. Sometimes we have to escape those voices. Not sometimes. We always have to escape those voices. And the only way to escape them in a world of mass technology is to find and build silence and solitude into our lives. But without it, it's impossible. And so, as we come back, okay, let's go back to the verse we started. But you put off concerning your former conduct the old man which grows corrupt according to the deceitful lusts, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind. And that you put on the new man which was created according to God in true righteousness and holiness. Building in silence and solitude into our lives is the key. I read a quote recently that said, silence and solitude is the bridge between our brain and our heart. Silence and solitude is the bridge between the brain and the heart. It allows them to communicate. Without it, the two function completely different. The two function completely different. Heart may say, I need to work towards forgiveness. Mind may say, man, this person wronged me. I need to deal with them so that they don't wrong me again. Silence and solitude allows you to deal with the issue, deal with the wrong that happened, but in a way that aims for forgiveness. But when we don't allow that, we don't allow that process to happen, what we do is we either act with the mind or we act with the heart. But what we need to do is bring them in line. The problem about this silence and solitude is sometimes it just takes a long time. And when we live in an age where things are fast, okay, we don't like to wait for answers. How many of you send an email to somebody asking a question? How often do you check? Get back to me? It's been 20 minutes. 2 hours. Sometimes I do it like, no joke, like it bothers me. I could be taking my kid to the bathroom and be like, no, they're going to answer me. I'm so impatient. It tells me something. If I'm unable to wait for an answer like to an email and it's like a simple question, how much more impatient am I going to be when it comes to like real matters of the heart? Matters that like my heart is breaking and I really just need like time and quiet in order to put my broken heart before God and say, God, what are we going to do about this? I don't have an answer. I don't know how to solve it. I don't even know what the next step is. It's a process. It takes time. Which is very against our current society. If you're a parent, you text your kid, how fast do you expect a response? Hey, where are you? You expect a response pretty quick. We need to build in and begin to take active control of our lives. And not say that we're victims of society, I'm victims of technology, I'm victim of this, victim of that. There are some matters in our lives, and everybody has them, that just need time. There's no way around it. You cannot choose to grow up from a toddler to an adult before the appropriate things happen. And there are some matters in life that just won't have an answer until you have grown appropriately for God to begin to say, okay, step one, this is what we're going to do. But sometimes we never get to step one because we're too impatient. We're too afraid to say, whoa, hold on, things have to stop. Life has to slow down. I can't keep up with this. I tell you the most common thing that I hear when people come and talk to me is that I can't wait to get out of my house. Like, why? Because things at home are just so like, it's like we walk on eggshells. Walk on eggshells because, like, I know if I say this, mom's going to explode. And if mom explodes, then dad's going to get upset. And it's just like, it's like people, like, we live in homes that just have, like, minds. So we tiptoe at home. How does a home get to that situation? Because when there were problems early on, we never took time to address them. So what happens is now we live in this home, which is supposed to be a place of peace, but really it's a place of false peace. It's a place where we're just waiting for something to explode. We know that like something is coming and it's going to erupt. How do lives get to that situation? Because we never took time to say stop. Let me quiet down. Let me listen and let me learn patience. Let me just wait for God to answer in His time, not my time. Silence and solitude are two things that are very foreign to our culture today. But they are two things that are indispensable to us when it comes to wanting to live a life that will be a transformative life. Because the main issues that hurt you, that hurt me, are the main issues that will either make us into a godly image, person of a godly image, or make us into something completely opposite. If we don't give it that time, the opposite will happen. We give it that time, God will transform us over time to be the picture of His Son. Two things we must fight for in society today. Any questions?